LMTalks, L'M POW is honored to have Cécile Gréboval, Program Manager at the Council of Europe. Her 20-year European-level experience on management, advocacy, policy analysis, communication and fundraising focuses on gender equality, gender mainstreaming, human rights and anti-discrimination. So welcome, Ms. Gréboval. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So you recently co-drafted a set of papers, a collection of papers called Gender-Based Asylum Claims and Non-Refoulement, Article 60 and 61 of the Istanbul Convention. In this collection of papers, this principle has been treated in a more practical and statistical point of view. So could you tell us where and when is this principle most applied?
Well, what we are trying to do actually is two things. So the paper that you have mentioned is about two very important articles of the Istanbul Convention of the Council of Europe. And this is about, the aim is really to explain what is meant with those articles to the countries which have ratified the Istanbul Convention. So this is about an existing instrument that we find extremely important to combat violence against women in general, but also to combat about violence against migrant women, because one of the important principles of the Istanbul Convention is that it should be applied without discrimination, including on the basis of migration status. So this is why the Istanbul Convention tries to include this principle of non-refoulement, which is, as you know, an important part of international law, and to explain it a little bit better. And also what is important with the Istanbul Convention is that for the states which have ratified it, there is also a monitoring exercise. So we have a group of, we have a sector, a division in the Council of Europe that will look into what the different countries have done in relation to the implementation of the different provisions of the Istanbul Convention, including in relation to refoulement. So in terms of the principle itself, I think the most important here is that when looking at non-refoulement, which is a general principle, we also take into account a gender equality perspective. And this means notably looking at what is called safe countries from a gender equality perspective. And that includes, for example, looking at the situation in the country where a person risks being returned, in terms of the situation on gender equality, women's rights, women's empowerment. So that's the big principle.
Okay, thank you. So you talked about safe country and the fact that the Council of Europe is monitoring the application of this principle among member states. In this paper, you highlighted how sometimes these principles are not effectively implemented. Do you think there is something that the Council of Europe can do to reinforce the application of these measures, especially in those countries that are not considered safe countries?
I think there are many things that can be done, and one important thing that we are doing right now in the Council of Europe is to prepare a new recommendation. So we have conventions which are ratified by member states, or not ratified. So, for example, the Istanbul Convention has been ratified by 34 member states, but some member states have not ratified it. And these conventions are obligatory for the member states which have ratified it. And then we also have more soft law instruments, which are called recommendations. And at the very moment, we are preparing a recommendation on migrant, refugee, and asylum-seeking women. And this here is aims to put together really the range of rights and of measures that we think are necessary in order to protect the rights of migrant women, refugee women, asylum-seeking women, and girls from the migration process. So during the trip, when they arrive in the country, and also in relation to returns when applicable. So this is one thing that we can do in our member states. And it is very important because when you look at the policies and the legislation on migration, very often the gender perspective is not very visible or is not enough highlighted. And then as well, when you look at gender equality policies, sometimes the migration perspective is not there. And even if you look, for example, at some of the organizations that deal with migration issue, sometimes it's what we call gender blind. So the women's situation and needs are not necessarily taken into account. So what we aim to do is really to put together the range of measures that we see as important and necessary in order to protect the rights of this group of women. And this is really about putting together some of the existing thinking or some of the existing policies that we see as best to protect women's rights and gender equality. But as you say, this is only one side of the coin. And as for many gender equality issues, there needs to be really a comprehensive approach and also a promotion of women's rights and gender equality in the countries of origin, which can be done by member states through their aid or through their foreign policy. For example, a number of countries have started to implement what they call feminist foreign policy. So this includes more funding, but also more support to adopt new legislation that defend women's rights. So this is a kind of new trend, and really it can be useful as a complement to protecting the rights of women on the move, and also protecting the rights of migrant women, but also making sure that in case women are returned to their countries, this is done in full respect of their rights. Although we know that migration is part of human history and it won't stop. So I think we also have to live with this phenomenon and try to make sure that this happens really in a way that respects the big principles of democracy and human rights and the rule of law.
Yes, that is fundamental. And so you namely call these measures to protect migrants, women migrants, gender sensitive, because there is the gender perspective that has to be pointed out in order for women to be effectively protected. These measures are mainly applied within borders, among borders and refugees camps. So do you think these measures are adequate for this context? And what can be done in case a woman faces discrimination and has her rights violated because of gender discrimination within refugees camps and borders?
We've been working a lot in the drafting committee while preparing this new text, and this is really about the very also practical elements that will help making sure that those rights are respected. It's about conditions of living, safety in detention or in transit, making sure that there are clean toilet facilities, making sure also that there are adequate services for women, for example, who have been victims of violence and trafficking, which is very frequent. It's also about putting in place the conditions where women who have been victims can actually lodge a complaint in a way that what it means, gender sensitivity in this context, for example, means that women asylum officers are available, that women interpreters are available. It can also mean that women who are victims of violence have the possibility to actually speak to asylum officers or the police without the presence of possibly their husband or anybody else who could interfere with the interview. And it's of course also making sure that all those people who actually deal with migration, asylum, and integration are trained to those issues, so that they are trained to actually recognize the potential signs of violence. They are trained to ask the right questions, and they are trained to make sure that victims really are in a position to tell their story, because there's also a very dark taboos around sexual violence, for example. Those taboos exist in all societies, and they are more present in some than others. It's also a question of making aware that women are aware of their rights and aware that what they have possibly endured during the trip is actually a violation of human rights, because in many cases they wouldn't even recognize that this thing which happened, I don't know, in a camp or while traveling is actually something they can complain about. And I believe in many cases, not all of these conditions are there to make sure that the victims can come forward or can complain or can even be treated adequately. Because treating victims of violence, and including sexual violence or victims who have trauma associated with trafficking for sexual exploitation, require very specialized service. And those services, we know, are often not available in our countries, even in some of our countries for citizens. So we can imagine that for migrants, it's the situation. We know that it's a very serious issue. So we try to make a list of what the ideal situation, the type of services that should be there in order to make this happen. But we know as well that it is very difficult, because we know that treating violence against women and all those services are already not there for most of the European countries. So it is a challenge, but it is important to also integrate and make sure that those women have the full protection that they require.
Yes, it is fundamental that these measures are applied so that women migrants can receive the protection they need. So I wanted really to thank you on behalf of the whole large movements community for not only the interview but also for your work. And it was very, very nice to have you here. And also thank you for watching this, and see you at the next LMTalks.
Thank you very much, and good luck for all the good work as well.